All right. Welcome everyone to this exciting webinar, and thank you so much for being here. My name is Dinah Mack. I'm the Education Program Manager with Massachusetts Farm to School. I'm so excited to be here with Rena Zampiran from Mass Audubon, who is always enlightens me with how to work with early childhood educators and youth and students. And I'm very excited to learn tonight. Um, if you haven't put your name and where you're coming from, what you teach, and the age of your students in the chat, that would be great. The chat is open, so please make sure that you mark to everyone so everyone can see what you're chatting. There's going to be a lot of time tonight to use the chat. And I have two announcements, and then I'm going to pass this over to Rena. The first announcement is if you don't know, on March 18th, we have the Massachusetts Farm and Sea to School Conference, and it's going to be in Northampton, March 18th. So save the date. The theme is building connections, resilience, and joy. And there are going to be early childhood programs. And here is the link in the chat. The registration goes live on Monday, so you'll see all the offerings and how to register. And the second thing I'm very excited to announce is that we have launched a Harvest of the Month for early care providers, early ed and early care providers. And I'm going to put the link in. It's a newsletter that is monthly. It connects to the local crop of the month. And you would, if you sign up, it's a no-cost program. You'll get a newsletter that has some food crop history, lesson plans, activities to do in your early childhood classroom, book suggestions, all sorts of interesting things, a great joke, all sorts of fun things. And we also have an elementary one for people who are in older grades here. But if you want to sign up, I'm going to put that link in. We hope you do sign up. It's a monthly email. We won't bombard you, but I think you will like it. And the first one came out recently. The crop is apples this month, and Rena has been helping us with this newsletter. So, Rena, I'm going to give you the floor, and if anyone has any questions at any time, please feel free to use the chat. And we will be sending this recording out to all of you, and also all of the PDFs and things like that that Rena shares.
Awesome. Yeah. Thank you so much, Dinah, for having me here. I love partnering with Mass Farm to School as another way to reach out to early educators and bring both farming and nature-based learning to young children and their teachers. So just to kind of get us warmed up a little bit, as you can see on the slides, it's a turn and talk, but basically this is an opportunity to share in the chat. To share with us an early experience that you had around growing or harvesting or eating farm or garden fresh produce. So any experience early in your life that involved fresh food or growing of food. And then you can also share with us, who did you share that experience with? And what do you remember from the experience in terms of the five senses? So, as you think about that memory, like what really comes back to you about that experience? So I'll give you a minute just to start typing up some ideas into I love seeing that Rebecca has already shared about Drumlin Farm. I will say that Drumlin Farm has been near and dear to my heart for many years. I spent 14 years teaching at their nature preschool about both nature-based and farming. But getting to learn how to milk the cows is so much fun. And I've taught even 2-year-olds how to do that, which is incredible. Rhonda, no worries. If you have no experiences with that early on, you can make experiences now for you and for your students, which is really exciting. So you can keep tossing those in there as you think about them. But we're going to have a lot of experiences and a lot of time for us to kind of share things that are special to us as we go through this series of workshops. Because as we begin to see the many ways that growing and farming and garden impact our own lives in whatever way that is, we'll see opportunities for tying it into the children's lives. Oh, good. We've got some more stories here. So Dinah shares tending garden boxes
Rena, Rena, you're falling out a little bit.
with your father, that it was a, and memories of dirt and pairing. Oh my goodness, now they're coming fast and furious. Grandparents had a garden, helping out in the summer, picking the tomatoes off the vine and eating them. Oh, so delicious. This is why I can't eat most tomatoes because they don't taste fresh enough. Lindsay having a garden with her mom and farmers markets, picking green beans and eating them, wild brambleberries. That sounds amazing. Oh yeah, growing a garden in a plastic solo cup. Absolutely. Something as simple as that. I know a lot of kids grow grass in paper cups and then they give it a haircut. That's a very popular preschool activity. Making maple syrup. Oh, so New England. Love it. A victory garden and fruit trees. So many awesome memories you have here. It's funny, we have so many Western Mass people out here. My grandfather, and he will come up many times during the workshop series, he was an apple farmer. He was an immigrant from Kiev, at the time Russia, now Ukraine. Came to the country when he was 7 and went to school, helped his father run a grocery store. And then after he served in World War II, he decided he wanted to make a change and became an apple farmer in the middle of nowhere, Michigan. And I never got to see the one in Michigan or his second farm in New York, but his third farm was a tiny backyard in Pittsfield, Mass. And I remember helping him in his garden. He was red-green colorblind, and he used to tell me he needed my help to find the ripe strawberries and tomatoes, which is absolutely not true. He easily could tell which ones were ripe without the color, but I really felt important helping him spot those ripe red fruits to eat. So, gardening definitely has some special memories for me as well. All right. Well, thank you for sharing your stories, and feel free to keep tossing them in there if you like. All right. So this is our Kids in the Garden workshop series. This is our first one, our introduction to what is Garden to Classroom. And we're really going to focus on, as I said, an introduction to what does it look like to do garden-based learning in a classroom and the different elements of it. And then the next 3 workshops will be diving into each of those segments more deeply, and really exploring how to do those in your classroom. So I hope you're able to join us for all 4 of them, but if not, no worries. But we're excited to have you here. And as Dinah said, my name is Rena Zampiron, and I am the statewide early education program manager for Mass Audubon. So just to give you a quick intro for those of you not familiar with us, we are Mass Audubon, the longest continually running Audubon society in the country. We are older than National Audubon. We were formed in 1896 by 2 fabulous Bostonian women who wanted to put a stop to people putting dead birds on their head and calling it fashion. So that's really where we have our roots, no pun intended. But what I find most interesting is that from the very beginning, our work has been very grounded in doing education with people of all ages. And so in addition to the advocacy work and the conservation, education has always been at the heart of all of that. And part of that focuses on accessibility and finding ways that everyone can access and reach and partake of natural spaces. So across the state, we have 110 sanctuaries, constantly looking for more spaces that we can help protect and create spaces for people. And you can just kind of see some of our metrics of how many people are able to currently take advantage of those, and we hope to increase that as we go. Here are all of our sanctuaries at the moment. And as you can see, we are all the way from the tip of the Cape and the islands all the way out to Western Mass. And of those many sites you see there, 6 of them have fully licensed nature preschools. So actual preschools that are on the site from anywhere between 9 to 12 months of the year, outside all types of weather, doing gardening, doing nature-based learning. So I hope that as we work together, you feel comfortable asking questions, because odds are, if you're wondering about a particular situation when doing this type of learning, we've probably encountered it. So I welcome any questions that you have about how to do this work. And then, we have really been focusing a lot on why do we want to reach out and include early education in our work. And that's because, as most of you probably already know, as early educators, you have probably the single greatest impact outside of an immediate family to start a child's learning journey. You get them first before they've had previous outdoor experiences. And we really want children to get those early and incredible benefits of getting outside, not just the physical, but the cognitive development, the social and emotional skills, the resiliency. We want children to begin building a connection with nature and seeing how it impacts their lives, and hopefully will help them grow into young adults who care about nature and want to protect it and be a part of it as well. So we do that through our licensed nature preschools. We do it through our preschool aged programs where we come and visit your school, like a lot of the work I've been doing in Springfield right now, family programs for families with young children, and then workshops and resources like these for early educators who want to start doing more of this work in their own practice. All right. So, why farm to early childhood? I feel like the farm to school movement has been around for a pretty good amount of time, and it's well documented all the incredible benefits. But the idea of farm to early childhood is a little bit newer, and starting to think, why are we doing this work? Why do we want to include farm based learning for young children? And I will say, I borrowed this information from the wonderful people at Shelburne Farms and Vermont Feed. Please check out their websites. They have incredible resources. But these are just a few of the reasons why we're doing this work right now. First of all, as with any kind of nature based learning, it's going to enhance the quality of the program. It's just so meaningful. It helps to support many different learning and programmatic needs. We'll talk about this a lot next week when we're focusing on curriculum. It also helps us to engage with families and communities among our early childhood family. We'll look at that a lot in our fourth workshop. It helps to support the development of the whole child, from social and emotional skills to language and literacy and math and fine and gross motor. And then some of the more obvious benefits, like promoting healthy eating and good wellness behaviors. It's also important, if we're going to be talking about food and growing and access to healthy meals, that we talk about promoting and advancing racial and social equity, because we know not everyone has the same level of access to fresh and locally grown foods. And then lastly, we want to develop the next generation of responsible eaters and growers. So all of these and more are just part of the reasons of why we want to be doing this work with children. Just going to pause, switch over. Yep. Okay. No questions so far. Feel free at any point to toss them up in the chat. Dinah can also give me a shout out if she sees something I've missed. All right, so this whole workshop is based off of this concept of the 3 C's of farm to school. And again, this is a borrowed concept from the Northeast Farm to School Institute. But the idea is the 3 C's are classroom, cafeteria, and community. So each of the workshops following today's series will be one of these 3 C's in greater detail. So we have the classroom piece. So that's everything having to do with curriculum around planting and growing food, knowing where it comes from, healthy eating, and why local food is important. The cafeteria piece is anything that involves preparing and consuming food, whether that is part of a school nutrition program with regular meals, or if it's a taste test, or if your school provides snacks, or if you're doing a family event where you want to provide some food there. So anytime children are getting to make and eat the food, that's part of the cafeteria. And then the community piece is what are all the different ways we can engage the larger community, whether that is your preschool families, local growers, farmers, policymakers, restaurant owners, grocery store workers, any other members of your extended community that are a part of that process, and how can we engage with them and bring them in. So we'll have a lot of opportunity to dive into each of these deeply. But today we're going to kind of get more of an introduction into them to kind of start us thinking about these three C's and why is it important to consider all of them when you're starting to do farm to school work. All right, so we're going to do a little idea share here. And I've had mixed success with the Padlet. So I think what we're going to do here is maybe toss some ideas out into the chat. And what we'll do is after we have a few ideas in the chat, we're going to think about which area does that activity fall into. So think of a school activity, either one you've already done with students or one you would like to do someday that has to do with farm to school. So maybe in the past during Thanksgiving time, you've done a stone soup activity with the kids where they all brought an ingredient in and cooked a soup. Or maybe in the spring, you've done an activity where they plant peas in little cups and then take them home. So think about an activity you've done or you'd like to do, toss it up in the chat, and then we'll share a few of those out loud and think about is it a classroom activity, a community activity, a cafeteria activity, or maybe something that crosses into multiple areas. I think to get us started, maybe I'll type one in to the chat as well, but you can start putting a few in as well. Let's see. All right, now we're starting to get some here. So let's see. Nicole shares planting seeds in the classroom. When they were big enough, they transferred them to the raised garden beds in the outdoor classroom. And then they enjoyed eating the beans and cucumbers when they came back to school in September. That is a rich activity there because it has multi stages to it. So let's see. How about, are people able to do reactions on this one or just raise hands? Probably just raising hands. So I would say that that activity started out as a curriculum activity because we were learning about planting of seeds, and it became somewhat of a community activity because it sounds like everyone kind of came together to do it. And then it was a cafeteria activity because they actually got to eat them. So that's an awesome one. Growing and cooking tomatoes and green beans with students and then using them to make a pizza. So again, a multi-category, both cafeteria and curriculum, making apple crumble, pickles, salsa, fries, and zucchini chips. Oh my gosh, you're making me hungry. Sunflowers, I love it. So that's a lot of that cafeteria piece. The Three Sisters Garden, Diane, I'm curious, did you have success with the Three Sisters Garden? I have tried that bed so many times and have never gotten it to work successfully. At least the corn was able to support the grain. That's impressive. I did not have a lot of luck with that one. Jill shares, giving the students an opportunity to make a hydroponic growing pot and grow a leafy green or herb within it. Love that as a cafeteria, as a classroom activity. And then that could be cafeteria if it's an herb or a green and they get to eat it later on. Field trips to apple farms combines curriculum and community. And I'm willing to bet if you took a field trip to an apple farm, you probably got to eat some of them too. So again, you'll start to see that there is definitely a lot of overlap between these activities. One of the ones that I find is often the trickiest for people to figure out how to do them in their class is that community piece. So we'll definitely talk about that a little bit. As early educators, you're undoubtedly experts of designing curriculum, and taste tests is something we can often work in. But I think it's important to start thinking about these three areas so we can focus on, we haven't really thought about ways to tie this in with our family community or our local community. So keeping all of those in mind. Making applesauce with crab apples from the tree in the playground. That is very creative. I have never tried that, but that is very interesting. The impact of the corn was better than hoped. The process of it was milled and turned into flour. Wow, Diane, you went full out on that. That is amazing. And trying Pumpkin Jack. I love that one. So, Pumpkin Jack is a wonderful children's book that shows the life cycle of a pumpkin from whole pumpkin that gets turned into jack-o'-lantern and it starts to mold and fall apart. And he eventually puts it in the garden and it turns into soil. But then some of the leftover seeds sprout the next year and grow a new pumpkin plant, which he then picks and shares with his friends. That's a really fun one. And I know a lot of schools that like to do the decomposition of a pumpkin. So they'll take a pumpkin that they cut up with the students and collected the seeds and then put it in a container with a lid and let it start to break down and watch it with the kids. That's a really fun one that you can do. You may want to make sure it has a lid or saran wrap at least because it can get pretty smelly. But you can also move it outside eventually. Awesome. Well, thank you for sharing all of your awesome ideas there. All right. So, as I said, in my previous experiences, and even just seeing the wide variety of activities you shared there, I think one area where schools often want to start putting more thought into is where can we do more of the community piece when it comes to the three C's? We're getting it into the curriculum. Hopefully, we'll find ways to do taste tests or bring it into our cafeteria. But thinking about how can we really make the most out of the family community and the school community and the local community to bring some of that farm to school elements in there as well. So we'll think about that a little bit today and then more later in the series. All right. So I also think it's important about what would this look like in our classroom is to think of a farm activity and think of ways that we can make it relevant and culturally responsive and accessible. So I'm going to ask you to do a quick little activity yourself with a piece of paper, and then we'll come back. And if you want to share them in the chat, you can. But either pick one of the activities you shared in the chat or pick another one you've done or would like to do, and then choose one of these three areas to do with that activity. So with your activity, how could you make the activity culturally responsive, especially with respect to the diverse cultures in your school? Or how could you make sure that this activity is accessible for children with diverse physical abilities? So, for example, low muscle tone may not be able to do a lot of fine motor work. Or how could you adapt this activity for children with diverse cognitive or developmental abilities? So, for example, children with sensory integration disorder. So, I'm going to give you about 5 minutes to do a little bit of thinking. Pick one of your activities and try at least one of these activities of how would I adapt it. And then at, we'll say 6:32, we'll come back together and share some of those ideas that you came up with. All right, let's come back together. And if anyone would like to type in the chat ways that they have adapted or could adapt one of their activities, that would be awesome. And Rhonda is first up out of the gate. So she states that making the apple crumble is culturally responsive because it encompasses students with specialized dietary needs, such as religious, allergies, can use blueberries instead of apples, vegetarian and vegan. Regarding diverse physical abilities, items can be pre-cut and pre-measured and using child-friendly tools to build motor strength. Awesome. Another thing to consider is sometimes the ingredients may or may not be gluten-free, so dietary restrictions there. I do know that apple crumble usually has butter in it, so it may not be considered vegan, but certainly considering the diverse dietary needs is a really big piece to that. As someone with pretty extensive dietary requirements myself, I know what it feels like to be excluded because I can't eat something that has been prepared, and what it feels like to have been part of the thought process and have someone put that extra step into it and make the effort to include me. So I think that that is certainly one way to show respect and cultural responsiveness. You could also look into it by having versions that use other types of fruit, such as what is it, Japanese pear, I think is similar to an apple and might work really well with this. Thinking about other types of spices you could add in that would give it a different type of local flavor. Um, awesome. I love some of that thought process. If anyone else would like to add in, there we go, Nicole. Thank you. Um, yes, absolutely. Asking families to share a dish or food that is important to them, whether it is part of religious or cultural practices from their country of origin or something they just love eating together as a family. We're going to talk about that a lot, both in the cooking workshop and the community workshop. And I love that. I think it's so special for children where they can see some of their recipes and practices reflected in their school setting. And it's wonderful for the families to be able to share that. And the class recipe book is one of my favorite farm to school activities. Um, and plant seeds of the major ingredients. Excellent. So you then use that recipe to help inform your garden decisions. That is a great idea because it's showing respect and understanding of the families of what crops and products are important to them, right? We may think that it's going to be all about planting corn and tomatoes, but there may be families that use a lot of tomatillos or Japanese cucumbers or certain herbs and spices that you might not have thought about including. Oh, no worries, Rhonda. But yeah, it's amazing how many different elements you need to think about when cooking, right? Of what people can and cannot eat. It's very, very tricky. Awesome. Any other ways to adapt for either cultural responsiveness, physical diversity, or cognitive and social and emotional? Diane shares working with first and second graders in a school garden setting. So you had the luxury of being able to plant seeds for glass gem corn. I am not familiar with that crop, but it sounds, oh, beautiful multicolored corn. Wow. So for physical disability, they liked counting the ears and the kernels to tell those who were harvesting what the count was. Great. So they could participate in the way that they were doing the counting and the sorting while others were doing the planting, because that can be very hard, those little seeds. For the cognitive disabilities, the touch, feel, smell was enough. Absolutely. The cultural aspect, that's a very interesting one. There are many of the cultures that use corn historically are localized in South and Central America. So maybe looking at some of those recipes and how they use corn could be something to think about. You could also compare it with other types of grain type foods that are grown and eaten. So, Central and South America, corn may be a very big product, but if we're looking at areas in Asia, rice might be something more frequently that is used, or looking at barley or oats, or just comparing all the different ways that, or grain type vegetables that we grow. Yeah, that sounds like a really pretty one. I'm going to have to look that one up. Nicole shares many ways to adapt to meet the needs of individual children. Modifications. Yep, always have to think about those, the various children in our program. How can we make something accessible to everyone? And then how can we make special accommodations as needed so that individuals can participate in a particular way? So help with fine motor skills, hand over hand, adaptive tools. I'm a big fan of the texture piece. I have a lot of texture issues, and there are certain things I don't want to touch. So the idea of gardening gloves can be huge, or using tools to plant or mix ingredients rather than hands. And then you may have children who are very sensory seeking and want the jobs where they stick their hands in the dirt or in the dough to mix things up. So that's a really great consideration as well. I'm loving all these ideas. Thank you so much for sharing. I just always think it's really important that as we start to do this work, I'm really thinking about how can we do this work in a way that feels and shows that everyone is welcome, and that we want everyone to feel comfortable and excited to participate in this. All right. So, a little overview back into the classroom. So, as I said before, for the 3Cs, the classroom piece is any activity around planting or planning your garden or caring for the garden, visiting the garden, harvesting from the garden. What I love about the classroom piece is it's not just science, and it's not just wellness. It is literature when we read books about gardening, and language when we talk about vocabulary. There is so many ways we can do art around the garden. It is hands-on. There are math concepts. There is science concepts. There are social and emotional activities. So, when we do the workshop on classroom, we're really going to be looking at all those different areas and ways in which children learn, and then how can the garden be used to teach those various subjects and domains. I'm very sorry my dog wants to join this workshop. Ideally, when you're doing the classroom piece, hopefully at least some of it will be outside, such as certain types of planting and growing. But I also understand that based on where your school is, shared spaces, sun access, all of these can make it difficult. So even if you cannot do any of your garden learning outside, there are still many ways that you can bring it into the classroom, including growing plants inside. We live in a time where we have access to grow lights and warming mats and sunny windows and heaters. So you can even make little greenhouses. There's lots of ways that you can do this work, no matter what your budget is and no matter what your space looks like. It's also really important when we think about the classroom piece, is that it's not even just about the growing. It's about talking to kids where your food comes from. I'm embarrassed to admit that I've worked with a bunch of schools and done a bunch of lessons about gardening and growing. And it wasn't until about halfway through the year, when I was working with a school, where they explained to me that most of their kids still didn't understand that the majority of the food they actually eat is grown on a farm. So yes, they understood that, like, yes, this tomato we planted, we're going to eat it. But everything they were buying from boxes and jars and cans and cartons from the store also came from a farm. So we had to back up a little bit and do some lessons around how does the food get from a farm into the grocery store. And when we look at a box of cereal or a carton of milk or a package of cookies, where are the ingredients in that from? How did they get their lives and starts on different types of farms? So really talking with the kids, where does the food start? How much of the food that we eat has been grown or raised in some way by some type of farmer? Talking to children about the seasonality of fruits and vegetables. Sure, lots of our food nowadays is shipped from all over the world, where it can be grown in any season. But I remember when my two daughters were very young, I had to explain to them why I couldn't give them peaches and plums in the winter, because I had to explain they're out of season. And they're like, well, what does that mean? And why can we still have apples in the winter? And why can we still have strawberries? And some of these plants can be grown in other parts of the world where it's still summer or can be kept in long storage. But there are certain plants that have a very limited growing season and only grow in certain climates. And so getting to explain to children the idea that not every food is available all year long. Talking to the children about the parts of plants and what are we actually eating when we eat a vegetable. Having discussions with children about what do all living things need to grow, whether you are a plant or a human or an animal or a fungi, healthy eating, and why is it important that we eat a variety of types of foods, and so many more topics. So we'll get into a lot of that, but just trying to give you a taste of the broad spectrum of everything that goes into curriculum around gardening and growing. So these are just a few of my favorite places to go for amazing curriculum ideas around gardening and growing with kids. I will have a bunch of these on some of my handouts. And I'm so excited, as Dinah mentioned, that now Farm to School, Mass Farm to School's Harvest of the Month has an early ed component. So now you can have ideas and recipes and fun facts that are specifically geared towards young children. But other places to go, Shelburne Farms has an amazing curriculum book specifically for early ed that you can download for free, which is incredible. Kids Gardening has some great stuff out there. National Farm to School Network. So definitely check out some of these resources for some good curriculum ideas that you can use. All right. So if we're going to be doing gardening with kids and growing with kids, we do need to think a little bit. How do we get started? How do we even begin this work? And one of the things I hear frequently from teachers is, well, we just don't have a garden or we don't have the space. So that's where you really have to start. Think about, what do you have space for? What's going to be possible? It may be that your outdoor space is 100% blacktop or concrete. So that may feel very limiting, but we're going to talk about ways that you can still do gardening there. What are the needs of your program? Are you a program that runs 12 months a year where you're going to have kids there all summer long who can care for a garden? Or are you a program that only is there for 9 months and is going to have to figure out, well, what do we do when we're not here? What is going to fit the needs of your students? Do you have infants and toddlers? And how is that going to impact what you're going to be able to grow? Do you have children with very diverse physical needs? And you're going to have to think about, how can we have a garden that everyone can physically engage in? We have some schools that have talked about challenges with gardening around community interference, where people come and take things or unfortunately negatively impact the garden, pulling things up that we're growing. So thinking about ways that we can help make sure the garden is protected for everyone to enjoy. Then, of course, there's the financial piece, which I know can often be a challenge. So thinking about, what might we be able to get in terms of funding, or where might organizations be willing to donate? And we'll talk a little bit about some of the options out there. And then, as I said, again, thinking about your growing calendar and your school calendar. So are you a 9-month program? Are you a 12-month program? If you're in Massachusetts, you probably know we've got a pretty short growing season. So you have to think about, oh, well, if I want to grow some of these sun-loving plants like tomatoes and peppers and melons, I better plan to start these inside to give them a head start. Whereas if you're coming to us from, southern part of the country, your growing season is going to be a little different. So there's also plants you're never going to be able to grow successfully here. It would be pretty tricky. I think it is possible, but it's very hard to grow things like peanuts and soybeans here. We just don't have the right kind of climate for it. So you got to think a little bit about that as well. All right, then you're getting into that planning stage. What are we going to do? This is where you really want to engage input from your students, from your classroom families, from your larger community. So, start with your class. What are they excited to grow? What do they like to eat? What do they want to try cooking? I also recommend thinking about your larger school community. I worked for many years in a program that had 6 classrooms, or Yeah, 6 classrooms, 6 garden beds. And if we didn't talk ahead of time, what we wound up with was 6 beds of lettuce and radishes, which is really not that fun. Why did we all plant lettuce and radishes? Because we knew they would all be ready in time for us to eat before the end of our spring session, because we weren't there in the summer. But we don't need 6 beds of lettuce and radishes, right? There are other options. We can plant things that will grow and ripen in the fall. We can plant peas. We can plant kale or broccoli. So you do want to plan with the rest of your school to think about how are we going to grow a garden that we can sustain, that's going to have a variety of products that the kids are going to be comfortable eating. If you have to worry about certain food allergies, there may be things you don't want to plant. If you have very young children, you may want to plant things that are fully edible, like herbs. So definitely keep that in mind as you're starting to plan your garden. I really recommend trying to get input from your families and from your local growers. So, as we said before, talk to the families. What kinds of herbs and spices do they like to grow? What kinds of vegetables are important to them? Are there certain flowers or other products that they would want to see in your garden? So, think about ways to include input so that your garden reflects the flavors and the cultural backgrounds of your families. And then definitely talk to your local growers, because they may know really well both what's going to grow well in your area, what may be some of the pitfalls of some of the things that you would grow, as well as what are some of the popular products in your area based on some of the demographics of the families that you have. So, when possible, get some outside ideas. Another way that you can do this is do a little survey with your students during snack and lunchtime. Find out what are their favorite foods, right? Are they eating tons of strawberries? Maybe you want to have a strawberry bed. Do they love cherry tomatoes? Do you find that a lot of kids are coming in with vegetable soup? And maybe that's something you would want to try to grow some ingredients for. Um, as I said, what foods are important to your family and community? What sort of recipes might you want to be able to make? And think about that health consideration piece. I have to admit, I was very embarrassed. We had students in the garden. We were doing a taste test of pea pods. And then I realized I had a child with an allergy to legumes, right? And peas are technically legumes. So I'm like, oh, that was not the right call. So you do have to think about some of these things, even though you're like, well, we don't have peanuts or sesame in here. Yes, but there are certain other foods that can be potentially challenging for certain health allergies. And then ideally, when should you be thinking about this? Well, right now is actually the perfect time. And this is actually why I ask the Mass Farm to School to hold this workshop in January, because I start planting my garden in February. I typically order my seeds in February. By the first week in March, I've already started a few of them inside, and I have a calendar of what am I going to start inside and when, what needs to go out in the ground, when am I going to move things over. So now is a good time to start thinking about it, so that if there are plants that take longer to grow and you want to start them inside, you can do that. Or you can order with enough leeway so that you know how much you're going to want and what's going to be available. So now is really the time to start having these conversations. And then planting the garden, what is that going to look like? So, as I said, it's important to learn your area's planting calendar. Every year I go online and look up either the Burpees calendar or Johnny Seeds or even Farmer's Almanac to look at what is the predicted planting calendar for this year in my area. So you literally just pop in your zip code and it will tell you these plants you should start indoors on this date, or start outdoors on this date, or start indoors and move them outside at this date. And this is when they'll be ready to eat. So I find those calendars very helpful for my purposes, so that I know when should I be starting these, where do they go, when do they go. It's very useful. I start some of my seeds inside, and I am finally having success with bell peppers. I've had the hardest time growing them to actually get them to the point of changing from green to any other color, because I don't really like green peppers. I like the sweeter peppers. So I've finally figured out I've got to start those wicked early inside, and they like a heating mat and they like a lot of light. So things like peppers and tomatoes and certain other plants that have a longer growing season, consider starting them inside. Then, as you start to get ready to do this with your kids, prepare your spaces for planting. So maybe you're lucky enough that you actually have an existing garden at your school, maybe with raised beds. So, around March, maybe April, that's when you're going to start getting the bed ready. You're going to go out with the kids and they're going to start digging around in the soil and pulling up any weeds and adding the compost and loosening things. Maybe it's something smaller or simpler. Maybe you just have a couple little flower pots or some of those big canvas movable bags called grow bags that you can have for a season and move them. Or maybe you have the aquaponics or hydroponics where you're growing them indoors in the water. But whatever it is, you got to get that space ready for planting the seeds. Then with the kids, you can plant the seedlings, you can plant individual seeds. Sometimes that's easier than others. You can plant bulbs. I will say, again, from that standpoint of accessibility, planting bulbs is one of the easiest things for kids with fine motor delays to plant, right? So garlic bulbs, onion bulbs, flower bulbs. Then you can have slightly larger seeds that are maybe not the easiest, but not terribly hard, like peas, beans, and sunflower seeds. And then you get into things like carrot seeds, and I can't even successfully plant them because they're so teeny tiny. So think about different ways and types of seeds you might want to do. And seedlings, they can be a little flimsy, so you may want the adult to help. Think about what this is going to look like with your students. I don't recommend having a class of 20 students all trying to put seeds in the ground at once. It's going to be a little chaotic. So what I might do is one group of students maybe turning over the soil in one bed with the teacher while another one is making rows and putting the seeds in. Or maybe you do it during recess time in the play yard, and half of the class is playing on the playground and you bring a few kids over at a time to plant some seeds. But usually something that requires a little more instruction like this, you're going to want to start with a slightly smaller group. And then again, how can we adapt this for the physical abilities? So bulbs, seedling size. You can do raised beds if you're lucky enough. You can try that, or planters or flower pots, which are higher. I will also say, I'm not sure if any of you have ever tried square foot gardening. I'm a big fan. And it's basically the idea that if you marked off a bed in terms of square foot shapes, there's a very clear mathematical equation for, oh, well, in 1 square foot, you can put 4 corn kernels, or you can put 16 carrot seeds, or 1 tomato plant. So it's very math and logic based, but they actually make a little plastic square with colored holes on it that show you, like, oh, if you're doing carrots and you can do 16, you'd use the orange holes, and 1 seed goes in each of these little holes and you drop it through the square and it goes in. And if you're doing the corn seeds, you use the blue circles and you drop the seeds in there. So you can literally just put this on the ground in the garden, and the kids drop the seeds in, and then you move it over a space and the kids put the seeds in. So that's another way that you can make it a little bit more accessible for fine little fingers there as well. Um, I love also that we see some comments in the chat. So many different types of containers that work, raised garden spaces. Not sure if you've ever all tried this, but the Home Depot, like 5-gallon buckets, those make great planters if you just drill a few holes in the bottom of the plastic and then fill it up with dirt, and they're easy and movable. So you don't have to get too fancy here. Awesome. All right, so this is an activity I want to do with you all. So this is going to be one that you go off and do it for a little bit with yourselves. And then if you want to come back and you can tell us about it, if you want to take a photo of it and put it in the chat, I love that. But this is something that I do with my students, and I call it planning a dream garden. So it's a fun thing to do with the kids. They can do their own individually. They can do them in small groups, or we can do it as a whole class. But the basic idea is we're going to design what our garden would look like if we could grow whatever we wanted. And you can decide how much structure to give them. As I said before, my garden at school had 6 rectangular beds. So I handed kids literally a piece of paper with 6 rectangles on it. And that was the blank template of our garden. And then on the table, we had drawing materials. We had all the free seed catalogs that you can get from Burpees and Johnny's, and the kids had scissors and glue sticks, and they could cut them out. They could color, they could draw, and they basically showed me, this is what I think this garden should look like. So that's one way you can do it, especially if you have something already set up. If you don't have something set up, or you're thinking a little bit more broadly, then you can design your absolute dream garden. If money was no issue, what would I want my garden to look like? So, what I'm going to encourage you to do is to take the next 10 minutes, and hopefully, you were able to grab some drawing materials. This does not have to be artistic. You can do this with words and shapes if you don't want to actually draw the garden itself. You can literally just have a garden bed, write the words in there, whatever's comfortable to you. But I want you to create your dream garden for your school or for your personal use. And we will come back right at 7:10. And again, if you want to take a photo with your camera and then try to drop it in the chat, I don't know if there's an easier way to do that. But if you're technologically savvy, by all means, try that out. But we will come back at 7:10 to talk about how the activity went. All right, welcome back, everyone. So if any, Dinah, I'm guessing there's no way for people to, for us to be able to see anyone like hold up their picture. Is that correct?
No, there's not. We can't see a picture hold up.
That's what I figured. Well, if anyone is able to take a photo and put it in the chat, that's awesome, but I don't know how to do that. So, um,
They could
but
also, Rena, they could also email them to you.
yeah, when I send out the handouts from the workshop, if you want to share with us your dream garden, I strongly encourage it. I will say, when I do this workshop in person, what I love to do is create a little gallery where people can use painter's tape and put them up on the wall. And it's really incredible to see how wildly different we all represent our dream garden. I think it's inspirational. I think it's beautiful. I love when they have different collage material and even 3D materials to really create almost like a museum of our dream gardens. So I do recommend that when you do this with children, that you have a way to really display them. What we did with our students when we had this was we put it up on our cork board that we had, and then our cork board is in our snack room. And so often when the kids were sitting down to snack or lunch, they would ask us to point out things on their garden and to talk about what was on there. And so it really inspired a lot of conversations with the children that then helped to lead us to understand a little bit more, what are the kids excited about? For example, I really hadn't planned that year to plant flowers in my garden because we really wanted to focus on things we could eat. But the children were very, very, very excited about flowers. They had a lot of them in their dream garden and they were talking about them and all the colors. So we decided to think a little creatively on how could we include flowers in our garden and still make it something that we could use in multiple ways. And so we planted nasturtiums, which are edible and are, my daughters love making me eat large handfuls of them because they kind of taste a little like horseradish and they think it's funny. We planted calendula, which is both edible and can be used as a natural dye. I planted sunflowers, which we could then use the seeds for and roast them. I think we may have had pansies, which you can eat as well. So we tried to think about ones that were either good as for eating or for natural dyeing, or even as something to attract pollinators that would then help pollinate the rest of our garden. So you know, we took some of the ideas from the children and found ways to still create a garden that would help feed the school, but also honor what they were very excited about and that we could then use for art and music and other activities. So that's one reason why I really love to do the dream garden idea, is because it's yet another way that children can express to you and have ownership over the design of the garden. And the more say the children have in what you plant and be a part of the entire process, the more likely they will be to eat the various foods that you're growing and try new recipes, because it's something that they had a hand in from the very beginning. So I think that this is a really important step to take when you're getting ready to do any kind of growing with children. And again, this can be seriously one or two little flower pots, right? This doesn't have to be a huge, big garden. All right, so we're not able to share out our gardens right now, but I do encourage you to send the photos along after I send out the email. And for just if there is anyone who does not want their email to be visible, please private message me or email me, and I won't put you in because normally I do a BCC when I send out a big mass email, and it will just be to the people in this workshop. But if you're comfortable with me having your email in there, then you don't have to let me know, and I'll include you so that you can respond to all and share your beautiful garden photos that you drew. Hopefully that's clear. Alrighty, so let's think a little bit about the cafeteria side of things. Now, first of all, I think it's important to mention this because in some early education settings, there is no cafeteria, right? In fact, in most, unless you are part of a public school, you don't have a cafeteria. Head Starts usually have a food program. It's a little different, but they do provide food. So, cafeteria and feeding the children may look very different from one program to another. But all of these pieces count as that cafeteria element. So whether it involves you cooking and baking with children to create a snack that they share, or even a tiny little taste test that they do, that is doing a cafeteria activity. It might mean that you're actually working with either cafeteria staff or nutrition staff or chefs to find fresh and local foods that you might incorporate into your school meals. This is a huge, great goal to have. But again, if you're a very small program or you have prepared meals ahead of time and don't have say in that, it's obviously a little bit different for your experience. As I said before, I think it's really important that children get to be responsible for the raising, harvesting, and prepping of the food. The more active they are in the process, the more likely they will be to actually eat it once it is made. This is also an area where you can bring in lots of community opportunities, whether that is reaching out to a restaurant and having a chef come in and do a lesson with the kids. It might be having a local farm produce and share something that you can then incorporate into your meals. It might be asking families for recipe ideas that could be tried as part of your cafeteria or your snack taste test. It may also be sharing taste tests with the families. So maybe the kids made something or the cafeteria made something with something that you grew, and you invite the parents to participate in a taste test. So lots of ways that you can engage your community. It may involve partnering with local farms for fresh ingredients or asking families for recipes. And then you also do need to be cognizant of any cultural and health related concerns around food. So whether that is a food allergy or sensitivity, or a family preference for being vegetarian or veganism, or a religious practice. For example, I keep kosher, so I would not be able to eat any meat products that you're producing because it's unlikely you went to get kosher meat, or those who practice halal. So thinking about all the different pieces that you need to consider when food is going to be on the table, literally and figuratively. So, how do we plan for success? If we're going to be doing things around eating and tasting and preparing food with children or for children, what is that going to look like? And again, we will have an entire workshop on cooking with young children that will go into this more in depth, but I wanted to at least give you a start to that. So, first of all, it involves orienting the children to the various tools you're going to use and how to use them safely. And I would say if the children sit down at the table, and the tools are already there, you're already too late. Because as soon as they sit down, if they see tools, they're going to grab them. So I would do this even as a circle activity where the kids are on the rug and I hold up the different tools and I show them how we're going to use them before they even get to the table. I think that's very important. It's how do we introduce the kids to the activity? If you start introducing them when they're already at the table and they're excited and they're chatting and they're all eager for the turn first, it's going to be a little tricky. So I, again, might introduce it as a circle time activity, or maybe we read a book about it, or maybe, we had a picture on our board so they knew what was coming. So how do we tell the kids about what we're going to be doing? I want to talk to the kids about the ingredients and where they come from. I think it's important to show them the ingredients before they've been prepared, even if you did some prep work for the majority of them, and talk about where did these ingredients come from? Are they local? Are they something that only grows far away? Are they indigenous to a place where some of our children's families came from? So thinking about that. It is very important if you're planning to cook with children to plan for what is the level of teacher involvement versus kid involvement, because the less teacher involvement there is and the heavier it is on children involvement, the better. I have had some very unpleasant cooking experiences with young children where they're all at the table waiting for a turn to pour in a teaspoon of something. And while they're doing that, all the other kids are bored and waiting for things, or they're sitting there while I quickly am peeling the apples and coring them. So, how can you do some pre work so that once the kids sit down, it's almost all their actions and work, and you're just really sitting there facilitating? And then, of course, taking into account ahead of time any dietary restrictions. So, don't wait until the day of, plan ahead. And if you know that your recipe is one that has something a child can't eat, have already had conversations with the families about how are they going to participate and what are they going to be able to eat and prepare. So, when cooking with kids, my first piece of advice is more hands make light work. So, if I'm doing the actual cooking with kids, what I really want is somebody who's coming up behind me and grabbing all the dirty things and cleaning them so they're out of the way. Because it gets very hard to cook when you've set down the maple syrup spoon and it's now stuck to the table and the flour has spilled over there and you've got 3 dirty cutting boards over here, but you need a clean one. So, somebody who can come in behind you and pull out the things that you're done with or that need to be washed before you can use them again is very helpful. This, by the way, is an excellent opportunity for community involvement. Ask a parent to come in and help for the day, be a volunteer for an hour, and they can help with that cleanup piece. It will make you very happy. It will make the parent happy or the grown-up happy, and the kid will be happy too. So think about small groups. Because in very rare circumstances, do I want all 20 kids sitting at the table at once? There are some activities that are hands-on enough that everyone can do it, or where one table can do one set of prep work with one teacher and the other can do a different set of prep work. But in many instances, a few kids at a time will be easier. Pick those recipes that let the kids participate meaningfully. If all they're doing is pouring in a spoonful of something and maybe one stir, might not be your most successful one. Think about ones where they really get to be physically involved. When possible, highlight fresh produce and farm ingredients. If it comes from a can, that's fine, but then show them a fresh example so they can make that connection. I don't expect you to steam and dice a bunch of tomatoes with the kids. So if that's what you need, fine, but have a fresh tomato so they can compare and feel them and smell them, maybe even taste them, so that you can kind of make that fresh homegrown connection. And then think about ways that you can use culturally responsive ingredients and recipes. So, maybe you're making a kind of salsa that uses particular herbs that are typical of a particular cooking style, or you're making a fruit salad with mangosteens or lychee or other things that may or may not be familiar to the kids. So think about what ingredients you can use or switch out. And then discuss while cooking the why, what, and where. Why are we making this? What are we using? What part of the plant are we eating? Where did they come from? And that would be a conversation I would have before, during, and after, right? You can keep talking about that to really solidify those ideas for the children. So some of that diverse cooking piece, and again, we'll dive into this a little bit more deeply later on, but certainly think about the physical and cognitive needs of your group, what they're going to be able to do, and what you may want to adapt. How do we adapt the recipe so it meets different dietary needs? Highlighting the different cultures and the ingredients. Bring the home into the school by sharing and trying recipes. So if you've made something with the kids, send that recipe home so they can try it there. And then ask the families to send recipes to you as well. So you can try some of their recipes, have that back and forth. And I love, whenever possible, can we let the families try it? Is it something we can send home? Or is it something that parents can try or families can try during pickup time, right? And let them try them with the kids. I'll also say this is another wonderful way to get kids more willing to try something is if they see their grown-ups eating it. So if they can do a taste test with their grown-ups when they arrive, that child who may have refused to try it during class time may be willing to try it when they see their grown-up do it, or at least will have a lot of pride and enthusiasm for having their family try something that they prepared. And that starts to build that confidence for trying new foods. So let's do a little scenario here. And this is one where you can pop ideas in the chat, but we're going to cover a classroom scenario. And this is looking at a potential classroom of students we may have where we're doing a cooking activity. And what are some ways that we can plan for this such that all of these students are able to participate? So, a popular activity at school is making stone soup. And every child is going to bring an ingredient from home. And then at school, the children will help to cut and make the soup. So if we have a class with these 6 students, in the chat, put how would you make this soup something that they could all be a part of. So I'll just read it out for you for those of you who may not have eyes on the screen. We have Uri, who keeps kosher and can't eat any non-kosher meat products. Jake, who has some fine and gross motor delays. Hiram, who just arrived from Colombia. His family does not speak much English, and they are not familiar with some of the ingredients on the list of what you're asking them to bring. Kimmy, who has autism, which leads to some anxiety around trying new foods. Irene's family is on food stamps, and Jasmine has celiac disease and can't eat gluten products. So in the chat, you can put 1 or 2 solutions or thoughts of how you would adapt for those children. Oh, and people put some ideas up here too. I'm glad to see that. We've got bumblebees drawn in the garden, and a dream garden that would be a sustainable space where you can grow crops used by the families. I love that. So we don't eat at the center. What you don't eat can be used at the families. I love that idea, Megan. And wildflowers for pollinators. Beautiful. All right, so we're just tossing up in the chat. What are some adaptations we can make to this soup making activity? I think I may have put everybody to sleep. Thank you, Rhonda. So I'll say for the first one, because it's one that applies to me and I've had this happen, is that I keep kosher. And so many of these recipes wind up using chicken stock or even a ham hock, heaven help me, to be part of the soup. If you just have a child bring in vegetable broth, then Uri can eat the soup and it's not an issue. So that's one adaptation that you could make there. And then it's not, we set aside a different soup for Uri. Now we made a soup that everyone, including Uri, can eat. Exactly, Dinah. Using vegetable broth is a great start to that. If you were planning on putting pasta in the soup, instead of doing pasta, which Jasmine wouldn't be able to do, you could think about doing rice, right? Because that is not a gluten product. For Hiram, ingredients switch, yes, based on what he eats. So ask him to bring in a vegetable that his family likes to put in soups. Another option is, as you're sending out the list to families of what ingredients they should bring, have a picture, right? It doesn't have to be written in words. It could be pictorial. And then it might be easier if they don't speak as much English, they could still match and recognize the vegetable. But I love the idea of having them bring their own favorite vegetables. You can certainly do translating of the recipe, which I definitely recommend. For Kimmy with her autism, what you might do is she may be more willing. Yeah, there we go. Let Kimmy touch it and smell it and feel it first. I love that. Have them do some of the food prep, talk about it. It may be that they like the veggies raw but not cooked. So maybe they could eat some of the raw veggies, or maybe they would eat them if you separate out some of their favorite ingredients that were in the soup rather than giving them the whole bowl. You could also send some home. Maybe they'd be willing to try it at home with their parents. That's a good one. What I would recommend for Irene's family is if you're lucky enough to have a garden at the school and there's an ingredient that the family can pick from the school garden that they could contribute, that would be one thing that they might be able to do so that they can bring an ingredient. Another thing I might ask is what would be easiest for them to sell, bring. So maybe they could bring some salt and pepper, right? Which may be something that would not impact the food that they have at home, that they could bring that in. Irene could certainly be instrumental in the preparation, as opposed to necessarily providing or harvesting from the garden. Sure. Yep. So Nicole say have it be vegetarian or vegan, which is great, and it would be better for the gluten free. Kimmy could choose what she brings. Hiram using Google Translate. They're all great ideas. For Jake with some of the fine and gross motor delays, maybe he'd be more comfortable doing the washing of the veggies rather than the cutting. You could give him like the little scrub brushes. They even have ones with like a little finger hold, so you slide it on, and then all the kid has to do is rub it on the vegetable. Or you could peel or cut something so it's much easier. Something like a soft cucumber where you've taken the skin off is another option. They could be responsible for dumping the ingredients into the pot. So just a lot of different ways. And I have to say, when it doesn't even look like you've done an adaptation and everyone's just doing everything, and nobody is singled out, it feels so much better than to be the person that, well, you can have this bowl over here that's we set aside for you that's different. And that's not necessarily the wrong thing, but whenever possible, if you can create a situation where it's something that everybody can do or everyone has a job, then it feels that much better and more inclusive. Awesome. Thank you. So, community. What are the ways in which we can include community? So many different ways. Start with your families because that's one of the closest communities that you have at the preschool or the school that you're at. To learn about their cultural food traditions and to find ways to bring healthy and culturally relevant foods into the school. Connect with local farmers and producers so that maybe you can, if not get enough for your meal plan, at least for taste tests of fruits, vegetables, eggs, dairy, and more. I have to say, I did some work with a school in Concord, and they had great success with working with a local dairy. And they actually had a dairy box outside the front door. And the kids, when they would come in the morning, they would open it to see if the milk delivery had come yet. And they would get very excited and they knew the farmer's name, and they would see what had come and know that that was going to be part of their snack. So that was just a really fun way that they involved their local farmers. Looking into local resources for support. So ways that you can get donations, right? That's another great community aspect, whether that might be, going to your local lumber yard and see if they have any offcuts of wood or old pallets that you could use to make garden beds, going to your nurseries and your Home Depots if they have any leftover seeds or seedlings that they weren't able to sell, reaching out to local agriculture tech schools if there's anyone there who would like to volunteer some time helping you in the garden. Grocery stores I've heard of giving tours to classrooms who come and visit and learn about where their food comes from. Beekeepers love to do lessons with kids about the work that they do and bring in all of their cool tools. So the sky's really the limit when you start thinking about who in the community might want to get involved and be a part of this. So feel free to think a little outside the box when it comes to your community and who might want to join in. So thinking about some of our school community and our immediate local community, here are some different ways and places where we've involved our immediate community at our school. So, we've got some images here. We, for a while, had a garden coordinator who worked at our preschool. And here she is. The kids had cut up the ingredients for a potato leek soup. And because she had the stove on, all the kids had to sit, but they could sit as she talked to them about the cooking process and the flavors and what's happening. So that's what's happening in the upper left-hand corner. And then we had a teacher who came in and showed the children how to drill a hole in a maple tree that we then tapped to collect the sap for syrup. So she's working. You can see the little boy actually has his hand on the drill. It's a hand drill. So the kids helped drill the hole. Then we had some family community events here. So at the bottom and then at the upper right-hand corner, 3 times a year, we had in-class events where we invited the families and the kids would prepare a special seasonal treat to share with the families. So we would do a fall apple crisp party where the kids prepared that. We would do a pancake party in the winter, and the children had been involved in collecting the maple sap and making the pancakes. And then in the spring, they would harvest strawberries, and we would make whipped cream with the kids for strawberry shortcake. And so this was a way that the families could come in and we could celebrate with all of them. And then even little moments like this, where the children, that's our play yard, and we just brought out a picnic blanket and some play food, and they were having their own little community moment there where they had like this little social gathering around the food. So what I would like you to do for, let's do about 2 minutes of thought here. It shouldn't take too long, is to think about some kind of community event you do at your school, whether it's an in-class event or an evening event with children, without children, and think about in that event, where does food fit into that event? And then think of one new idea you could use to enhance diversity and inclusion by the food choices that you are making at that event. So let's say I'll give you till 7:40 for this one. So 5 minutes to think about it and jot down your ideas in the chat. And at 7:40, we'll start reading your ideas. Try. There we go. Okay, good. There we go. So I love some of these ideas that we see up here already. So the Hanukkah party where people were bringing in foods from wherever their families are from. I love that. Um, yes, cooking projects, especially around the Jewish holidays. That's my jive. So a big fan of that. The families come in to help with the projects is a great way to do that. Potato latkes, Hamantaschen. Oh, I love that. And I think that's a really good idea too, right? To create similar opportunities to celebrate the foods of families who are not Jewish. And there's also many different types of Jewish recipes that maybe not be familiar to you. My family's tradition is to make barekas, tuna barekas for Shavuot, and nobody's ever heard of putting tuna in a barekas. So, there may be different Jewish recipes and then definitely non-Jewish recipes. What are some things that you like to eat around the holidays or this time of year, right? Or some of your favorite products. So I think that's really great. You have families that are coming from Guatemala, Nepal, Netherlands, Japan, and Russia. That's great. Definitely encourage them to find ways to share some of their recipes that you can all try. Rhonda shares social studies. You study culture and traditions. The country is chosen by a group of 3 or 4 to present research based on geography, culture, traditions. This is clearly much older than preschoolers, but I love it. Museum is set up at the school where families come and the children serve as docents and offer samples of the food at a multicultural night. Wow, that is fun. Encompasses all areas of the curriculum and learning styles when prepping food. That is awesome. I love that. And that just exemplifies what we'll be talking about in the classroom workshop because, yeah, you could say that this is a social studies activity, but it's so much more than that, right? There's art as they're making the setup, and there's the community aspect and the social and emotional piece, and math as they probably try to figure out the recipes and the ratios and how much do we need to make. And there's language and literacy as they're talking about their stations and all of that. That is an awesome, awesome activity that you do. Love that. And yes, Dinah Homentashen does sound pretty good right about now. We got a couple months to wait. Awesome. Well, thank you for sharing some of your family events, and feel free to keep tossing them in there as you work on them, but we'll keep moving on. All right, so food and eating and cooking, they unify us all. And so that's why I think that of all of the different nature based topics that I do, I really feel like gardening and cooking is the one that to me feels the most culturally diverse and inclusive, and just a great way to really learn about all of the different things that are important and special to your families. So I just love bringing that into the curriculum with the students and the families. So this is our last activity of the night, and then we're going to wrap up. But I do like to do this one, and I have to say, I have taught teachers how to do this activity, but for the first time ever yesterday, I did this with actual students, which was really fun for me to see what it looks like. They were first graders, so a little bit older than pre-K, but they did a great job. So what you're going to do is hopefully you've got a piece of paper and a writing utensil. You can do it this way. It's a little fancy. I usually just fold the paper in half and open it and then fold the two ends to the center. So it's kind of like a book. It opens like this. But you're going to draw your face on the piece of paper. And then you're going to think of a food that is special to you, that has some kind of special memory with it, whether it is something you always ate at a particular holiday, or something you remember making with a family member who was special to you, or you always ate it on your birthday. Whatever that food is, what you're going to do is after you've drawn your face, the flap that will be under your mouth, you're going to draw a picture of that food. And then the flap that's in your head, you're going to write down the words that come to mind when you think about that food. All right. So you're kind of like creating this little food memory here. So take about 5 minutes to create this. And, just so you have it for yourself. And, while you're working on that, I'll just share with you my little food memories. You can just kind of get your paper and get going. But when I do this, I usually pick borscht, which is a recipe I learned from my grandfather, who was born in Kiev. At the time, it was Russia. Now it's in Belarus. But he brought that recipe with his family over to this country, and taught me how to make it. And eventually he decided that I made it so well that I was the one in charge of making it for the family now. It actually happens to have been one of the last foods he ate towards the end of his life. No, it was not responsible for killing him. But at a point when he really wasn't interested in much, he was willing to eat my borscht. And we always used to make it for the holiday of Passover. So that's a special food memory for me. And it grounds me not only in my historical culture, but also the ingredients from it were indigenous to the place where he was from. So beets were something that was used very frequently in Eastern European dishes. So the ingredients originated there, the recipe originated there, and it's something that I still hold very dear to myself. So I'll give you just another few minutes. You can do your food memory on paper if you just want to think about it, and then anyone who feels comfortable doing so can toss up their food memory in the chat. So just so you have a full idea of the activity, I did flip to the second slide where you can see what it looks like when you open up the flaps. So you can see a picture of the food inside their mouth and then some of the words that come to mind when they think about them. So, as I said, this was something that I did with students, and they actually had some really cool words thinking about their foods. Some of them went with words like yummy and happy, but some of them went for thankful for my family and thankful for God for making these foods. And this was not a religious school. But they came up with some very interesting ones. And it wasn't all chocolate chip cookies either. There was vegetable soup in there. A lot of them were actually fresh foods like fruits and vegetables. Yeah, totally fine. It's kind of hard to explain it, unfortunately, but it's just basically the idea of just having a piece of paper that you can open. So the face is on the front, and then when you open it, they can draw a picture of the food where the mouth was, and they can draw the words there. So, um, and I did actually have an example of this, but it's upstairs in my office where my internet wasn't working, so I don't have it on me at the moment. And if anyone would like to share their food memory in the chat, feel free to do so, but no pressure. All right, so with the interest of making sure that I get you all out of here on time. Oh, well, don't worry about the folding. I'm not very good at origami. Um, but it's a fun one to try with kids, and you can figure out how you want to fold it, or you could even do two pieces of paper stapled together and they lift one up, whatever works. But feel free to keep working on them. Feel free to toss them in the chat if you want, but we're going to start to wrap up so that you have enough time for any questions, and then you can get the additional resources at the end. All right, so you will hear me say this probably at all of the workshops, but I do think that it is really important that we remember that farming and gardening is a lot more than just vegetables. It's even more than just fruit and flowers. There are so many different types and ways to garden and farm, and that includes things like maple sugaring, which we are actually quickly approaching the season. It usually starts in early February. So we are in a part of the country where we get to harvest sap from trees and turn it into syrup. So that is a kind of farming. My grandfather, as I already told you, was an orchardist. So he grew apples and did not have vineyards, but grew other types of fruit trees as well. There is growing of honey and beekeeping and the using of wax, and even farming out your bees to local farms for pollination, which I have partnered with beekeepers on that as well. There is the idea of wool craft and felting. And so getting wool from sheep, and what do we do with that? And then beyond that, it's all other types of fiber that we grow and raise and use, whether that is Angora from rabbits, cashmere from goats, alpaca has become very popular. There's also plant-based clothing as well, like hemp and bamboo, and even straw is used sometimes to make things like hats, and cotton, which we can't grow here, but is grown on farms. So our clothing comes from farms in many ways. There's the idea of grain and baking, right? You may not easily be able to grow wheat for use in flours, but it is important that kids know that that's grown on a farm, and you can still talk about the process and make things with flour. There is, of course, dairy, meat, and eggs, which is all raised on farms. And obviously, approach with caution, as you may have families with different comfort levels or practices around eating meat, dairy, or eggs, but I think it's important to consider it as a topic. There is the raising of fish, right? There are fish farms, and there's a practice of fishing, which is not farming, but is still a part of collecting, raising, and using products for food. And then ideas of things like drying and canning and preserving our food is another really important farming and gardening topic. So a few more ideas on resources, and these will get repeated throughout, but thinking about ways that you can get some supplies that you may need or some support. So going to local greenhouses or even places like Home Depot and Lowe's to ask for seed or seedling donations. I will also say more and more libraries are starting to do seed catalogs or seed libraries where people bring in extra seeds that they won't be using and you can help yourself. And sometimes there are even seedling swaps as well, where people raise too many seedlings and will swap them or give them away. Reaching out to lumber yards for donated lumber or discounted lumber, or even old pallets can be used to make garden beds. Looking into agriculture, students and schools, local beekeepers, 4-H students sometimes will come in and do lessons. Eagle Scouts and Girl Scouts that are working on their final projects are actually who built our garden beds because they needed a volunteer project. Grocery stores, you can really get pretty creative out there. And then local farms and farmers markets and grocery stores may be willing to donate or sell at a discount any unsold products. And then places that have farm to school curriculum and programs with online resources like Shelburne Farm, Island Grown, Growing Minds, and of course, Mass Farm to School. And then lastly, a couple more resources for you from Mass Audubon. So right now you are in our Kids in the Garden workshop series, but we do also have several series for early educators around nature-based learning, everything from different areas of curriculum development and how math and science and finding gross motor and language and literacy can be done in a nature-based way. We also have a workshop series all about kind of an introduction. What are some ways to bring nature-based learning inside your classroom? How do you get outside with children and do nature-based learning, as well as some of the logistical support around gear and family concerns and any of those challenges you might face. So we offer all of those. We do customized professional trainings if your school has particular topics or areas of curriculum you're focused on. For example, I've worked a lot with many Jewish preschools to do some nature-based activities that support Jewish curriculum. I've worked with Montessori and Reggio schools, some Waldorf, some dual language programs, so we can kind of tailor some of our trainings to really fit your school's needs. We do site visits where we come and visit your spaces and you talk to us a little bit about how you use them. And then we write up a customized report for you about how you can use your existing space to do more nature-based learning or garden-based learning. We do curriculum consulting and coaching. So we come in and do demo lessons with your classes, and then we get a chance to debrief with you and start to co-plan and co-teach lessons. And then when you put all of the PD and the site visits and the coaching and consulting, you get our Seeds program, which is up to 9 or 12 months where we work very closely with your classrooms to do trainings and resources and really do some mentoring so that at the end of the partnership, your classes and your teachers feel fully ready to implement either garden-based or nature-based learning into your schools. And that's actually one of the things I've been doing in Springfield is some of that deep impact work where we're doing demo lessons and co-planning with the teachers and some workshops to help them feel prepared and excited to do some of this garden-based work. Now, there are some free resources out there. We have our quarterly early ed newsletter. I send it out 4 times a year. I will send you the link with the other resources. But when I send it out, it's curriculum ideas based on something relevant to the season. And then any places where we're going to be presenting, some of which are free if you want to come and join us and sign up for more of our workshops. So it's well worth signing up to get that info. We also have online 4 free nature-based STEM units for early educators, trees, weather, dirt, and birds. You can just download them from our website. I will include the link in the email, and it's available in English and Spanish. We have our Young Explorers activity pages online on our website, some nature bingo cards that you can print out the bingo cards and use them like scavenger hunts, and then some nature play videos. And then lastly, you'll see here, those are our Nature Smart activity books. Less garden focused, more nature based, but they do cover a variety of ages and they have everything from art activities you can do with kids, science activities, handouts that cover math and literacy. They're really fun. So that QR code takes us to the page where you can learn more about them. So that's another thing you may want to check out. And then lastly, I wanted to give you, that is an email you can reach me at, or you can use the one I sent earlier. and a quick QR code for 3-question survey if you have any input for us about other workshops you'd like to see or ways that we can support you. We would love to do that. I am also just catching up here. Dinah is encouraging you to sign up for the Harvest of the Month early ed page. Please do that. And the conference. And I am loving all of these things that people are putting in here with stories. This is great. But I will be on for the next few minutes. If you have any questions, I'll stay on to answer them. And I do hope you sign up for our other workshops. They're going to be really fun and hands-on. Then I'm going to pass it off to you because that was just like verbally explosive.
Was explosion. Well, I put links in the chat for people if you haven't signed up for Rena's other 3 workshops this month. There's a link in the chat for that. As Rena said, please sign up for our early ed newsletter. We're very excited. It's hot off the presses this month, and we'd love to send that to you. And I also put our mailing list link in if you want to stay current on Mass Farm to School and our offerings. And we do have an events page on the website, which I put in. Rebecca had mentioned mushrooms. We are having a mushroom workshop for educators, but we have all sorts of workshops like this as well. Hey, we have a guest.
This is Rivka, one of my 2
Hi,
9-year-old daughters,
Rivka.
who's been sitting quietly on the floor for the past 2 hours reading, knowing that she could not interrupt my workshop. But she came in to say hi. And here comes my other 9-year-old. This is Ziva.
All right.
They will probably
Hello, you
sneak in
too.
at various points in time, but we're very well behaved. So thank you all so much for joining us tonight. And I will send out those resources, and I hopefully will see you all next week.